Monday, October 13th, and welcome to the Steve Beaman Journey. Today, as we do every day, we're going to cover the top news of the day and give you some new insights on how it might be looked at and interpreted, and we're going to walk together down the financial path. It's Monday, so it's the Financial Monday. Welcome to the journey.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In a world of uncertainty, where business, freedom, and the future hang in the balance, one voice rises with clarity, experience, wisdom, and conviction. This is the Steve Beaman Show, the voice of the independent American.
Welcome back, my friends, and happy Monday. I hope you had a good weekend. And as always, on Mondays, we're going to be traveling the financial path. This, of course, follows with Tuesday on the emotional path, Wednesday on the intellectual path, Thursday on the physical path, and finishing Friday on the spiritual path. I believe all of these 5 paths come together to build that happiness and prosperity we desire, and it builds a really full person. So today, we're going to look at the top news of the day, and we're going to tie it all to the financial path. So stay with me as we journey today together. What a day it is for people in the Middle East. I mean, how exciting. You've seen the videos of the hostages coming home and what looks like at least a tentative peace agreement that could actually hold in the Middle East. I mean, around kitchen tables now, from Tel Aviv to Amman, from Riyadh to Washington, families once again look together with hope. We hope this time that peace can actually hold and it won't be given to politics and pride, destroying it like it has in the past. Now, interestingly, you can love Donald Trump or you can hate Donald Trump, but you cannot fail to give him and his administration credit for this. For decades, since I've been a kid, politicians have promised Middle East peace. Go back to Jimmy Carter and the Camp David Accords. We've been looking for sustainable peace in the Mideast a long time, frankly, since Israel became a nation in the 40s. But the reality is, this time around, it looks like it might actually happen through a kind of a combination of persuasion, pressure, and practical economics. This administration seems to have reopened doors and put together a framework for what might be a sustainable peace. This moment follows on the Abraham Accords, which was signed during Trump's first term in office. This began first time really to normalize relations between Israel and the other Arab nations. They opened embassies, they opened air travel. Major accomplishment in the Abraham Accords, but this continues that process and really does hope to create continued stable peace in the Mideast. Now, the Abraham Accords shattered assumptions because it had always been thought that the other Arab countries would never recognize and fully adopt Israel as an economic partner, but it began that process. And I think it's Trump's, what I'm going to call his policy being commerce over calamity, because what Trump really did is use economic policy to create sustainability. The idea is, let's trade, not raid. Let's not consume our wealth through generations of warfare, but let's build our wealth through generations of prosperity. That's a real different model in the Mideast, and I hope that rather than having continuous war that just destroys wealth, we can create wealth through continuous peace. Now, I believe people of goodwill everywhere are going to celebrate this. Absolutely, we should. Ordinary citizens are tired of funerals. They're tired of sanctions and rocket sirens. They want schools, trade, and stability. Peace through commerce, though, is not naive idealism. It's the oldest form of diplomacy known to man. When people are doing business together, well, they're less interested in bombing each other. So let's let commerce prevail. Of course, it's going to be very interesting to watch the anti-Trump people get together on this, because some, no matter what he accomplishes, it won't be enough. You've seen that before. Politics has become so tribal that even success such as this is filtered through resentment. I mean, history does tend to cut through partisanship, and we hope it will. I mean, if you remember Jimmy Carter, Menachem Begin, and Anwar Sadat receiving the Nobel Prize for Camp David, that was a major accomplishment because for the first time, Egypt recognized Israel's right to exist. Quite an accomplishment, well worthy of the Nobel Prize. But roll the clock forward to the 1990s when a Nobel Prize was awarded for the Oslo Accords, which had Yasser Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin, and Sharon Peres. This was a peace that didn't hold. This was a hope for, but negotiating with the Palestinian Liberation Organization was not a road to peace. It's like Hamas. And so that went nowhere. And then roll the clock forward even more when Barack Obama got the Nobel Prize. It was really for nothing. It was for the hope of reducing nuclear weapons stocks in the world. But all he did was really pay for Iran to go ahead and continue their nuclear program. So by contrast, if we look at Trump, and I'm digressing a little bit into this Nobel Prize thing because I got a lot of feedback on Friday's commentary that I thought it was a little bit unfair. But Trump's record of sustained peace through progress, Pakistan actually nominated Trump for a Nobel Prize. That's tangible. So whether or not you like the man, history is going to record that he did more than anyone since the Camp David Accords. Perhaps, and this is going to cause some rancor to some, I know, but perhaps just as Franklin Roosevelt reshaped America through the New Deal, Trump may prove to be just as transformational in reshaping the political order for the 21st century. I know that's going to cause some people consternation, but Roosevelt rebuilt an economy by teaching that government could be a beneficial thing for people. Trump is re-engineering a region and maybe the U.S. stance globally. Time, of course, will tell. We never know, but history will be the judge of that. Well, it's ironic. While one leader is using economics to build peace abroad, another is using economics to reopen wounds at home. Let's move, if we can, to California, where Governor Gavin Newsom has announced the creation of the Department of Reparations Implementation. This is a brand new bureaucracy charged with developing state-level reparations programs for descendants of slaves. Now, none of us, at least none of us with any decency or reason, believe slavery was anything but evil. It was. The Civil War, with its 650,000 to 750,000 casualties, was a price that we paid to end that evil, and most of us think that was a price well paid. The injustices that followed that, whether it was Jim Crow, segregation, or racial terror, was no less egregious and no less horrific. They were moral abominations that contradicted every promise this nation was supposed to hold true. But moral condemnation and financial compensation are not the same things. So the question is, truly at the core, how does California justify paying reparations when even at slavery's peak, around 1.5% of the American population owned slaves? That's a small number. Now, it skyrockets when you go to the South. There, 25 to 30% of the people own slaves. But as a nation, it was about 1.5%. In California, it was zero. They had no slaves and no slave owners. Let's remember, California was admitted to the Union as a free state. So the proposal floated by the task force is suggesting reparation payments of about $250,000 for every descendant of slaves, every eligible person. Well, on paper, that sounds compassionate. In practice, it's fiscal fantasy. Let me give you an interesting statistic to keep in mind. Since the implementation of the Great Society programs in 1965, federal and state governments have collectively spent about $22 trillion, $22 trillion on the anti-poverty programs, which were overwhelmingly targeted at reducing the inequality rooted in America's racial past. There's no question about that. So if we adjust it for inflation and adjust it for descendants of slavery, that's about $500,000 that we've given out for every black family in the country. In other words, we've already invested amounts far greater than the reparations would be asked for. These are the programs that were intended to rectify this. Now, I'm not dismissing moral responsibility, not at all. I'm just trying to recognize financial reality, and I'm trying to put this in not as flame-throwing commentary, but as an honest, open discussion with questions that we need to answer. If California were to pay full reparations per their board, it would be twice the state's annual budget. And what do we do with the money we've already paid? And who would pay that? Would it be the immigrants who came to the United States after the Civil War? And who would get it? How do we determine who's a descendant directly of a slave or not? I know these are tough questions, and I respect it. But, are we looking to tax the middle-class family who's already overburdened by regulations and taxes? I don't think that's an answer. And beyond the math lies something much more disturbing to me, and that's unity. Dividing Americans into racial or historical camps will never heal this nation. Unity, not fragmentation, builds prosperity. Economic empowerment can't be achieved by taking from this person to give it to another. That doesn't work. It's achieved when everyone is given the opportunity to create, to own, and participate. So Governor Newsom may in this situation have noble motives. I really don't know. But even noble intentions bow to facts. If we truly want equality, it begins with shared opportunity, not selective compensation. The financial path forward must be paved with enterprise, education, and ownership. Black, white, or any other color, the future belongs to those who build, not those who bill. Think about what that means for the next generation. A child in Los Angeles or Chicago will not gain dignity from a government check written for sins 2 centuries old. They will gain dignity from earning, producing, and owning. As Dr. King said, what good is having a right to sit at the lunch counter if you can't afford to buy the hamburger? Economic liberty, not perpetual grievance, is what ultimately secures justice. But let me move now from that to a message of economic independence. It's different but not unrelated. Jamie Dimon, the chairman of J.P. Morgan Chase, that great big bank that we all know about, he recently warned that the U.S. is too reliant on foreign powers for unsustainable sources. He's talking about the rare earth minerals and how reliant we are on foreign countries for those. To give you a statistic, China houses and is in control of 70% of global rare earth reserves. 70%. And they produce 90% of the processed rare earth minerals that you use in your batteries and your solar stuff and your electric vehicles and our space systems and our advanced weapon systems, all of that. They power everything through that. So his point is, if that supply chain gets cut off, well, that's real trouble for real people. So what he's done in response, I think, is really remarkable. He's proposing J.P. Morgan Chase put up $1.5 trillion into a program that will foster the development of those industries in the U.S. That's enormous. Now, $10 billion of it, he's saying is going to be direct investment, with the balance being from loans and things like that. What a wonderful program, though, of an American company stepping up to support Made in America policies. This is enormous because the financial path that we talk about, it teaches that productivity and production controls destiny. We need to be in charge of our own destiny here in America. We once understood that. It's not too long ago that we mined our own steel, we built our own cars, we forged our own chips. But then, beginning somewhere in the 1980s, we lost our way. We began exporting that capacity overseas for cheaper goods and cheaper labor. I mean, it didn't work, and we're discovering the hidden cost, strategic vulnerability, without question. Dimon's initiative represents much more to me than a corporate investment. It's a declaration of independence for the modern economy. It says the United States must once more become the workshop of the world. And it aligns perfectly with the talks we have every Monday, financial literacy as the bedrock of financial freedom. Whether it's a household budget or a national balance sheet, self-reliance is the first law of prosperity. And as we talk a lot of times in this, in the digital world that we're moving into, it's going to be defined by artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and robotics. Whoever commands the supply chain commands destiny. And that's how you protect freedom. It's not with fantasies, but with factories. Not with promises, but with production. Economic independence is not isolationism. It's the freedom to trade by choice, not necessity, to negotiate from strength, not dependence. So if you step back, you can see how these three stories kind of come together. Trump, with his using commerce as the negotiation tool of power in the Mideast. Newsom, warning that politics can destroy, we see by this, it can destroy prosperity when it overrides economics. But then coming back to Diamond's initiative that reminds us that true peace and prosperity rests on independence, financial, industrial, and moral. Each of these threads pulls on the same fiscal truth. Finance is the bloodstream of freedom. It nourishes the body politic, and when the flow is healthy, nations thrive. When it clots under debt, division, and dependency, liberty weakens. So as we watch hostages walk free, politicians argue over reparations, and CEOs invest in America's future, remember this. The financial path isn't about Wall Street tickers or Washington budgets. It's about stewardship. It's about using money, markets, and enterprise as tools of human dignity. Handle them wisely and you sustain peace, unity, and prosperity. Handle them poorly and you divide a nation and you mortgage its soul. And that brings us to our next segment, directly from the financial path, from dependency to dignity. I'll be right back. You're listening to the Steve Beaman Journey, where we explore family, faith, and freedom, and the 5 paths to a transformed life. If today's message on the financial path is hitting home, if you're ready to take control of your money instead of letting your money control you, I want to invite you to take the next step. Visit stevebeaman.com and look for the Path to Prosperity Masterclass. It's a deep dive program that walks you through the principles we talk about here: saving, investing, eliminating the bad debt, and building real wealth with purpose. You'll find practical steps, downloadable tools, and encouragement to help you move from dependency to dignity, because financial freedom isn't a theory, it's a habit, and one you can start today. This is the Steve Beaman Journey. Welcome back to the Steve Beaman Journey, my friends, as we continue today, Monday, October 13th, 2025, on the financial path. We have looked this morning, or today, at peace abroad and division at home, at commerce as a fence for stability, and ideology as a force for conflict. But the real test of all these stories, whether it's the Middle East, California, or Wall Street, comes down to one question. What is our relationship with money? Because money, at its heart, is not just currency. It's a mirror. It reflects our values, our habits, and our priorities. If we want to understand a nation's soul, we have to read its balance sheet. The same is true for each of us, by the way. What we buy, what we save, what we owe, those are moral choices as much as financial ones. So that's why every Monday we walk down this financial path together to rediscover, if we can, the link between finance and freedom, between responsibility and reward, and character and capital. So one of the oldest truths in economics is that value flows toward virtue. In other words, economies reward behaviors that create, produce, and innovate, and they punish those that consume without replenishing. That's not cruelty, by the way. It's natural law. You can't cheat gravity. Frankly, you can't cheat economics. But a free market, clearly from all we've seen in history, is the fairest system ever devised because it listens only to the truth of the marketplace. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care where you were born or what political party you adhere to. It only cares whether you deliver something that's of value to someone else. And that's why the shoemaker and the software engineer live by the same moral code. Serve others and you'll prosper. Exploit others and you'll perish. Yet over time, we in this country have replaced this moral economy with an emotional one. We've taught that from generations now that feelings outrank facts, that the government will fix what effort refuses to, and that personal responsibility is optional. Well, that's not compassion. That's corruption of character and disguised as kindness. I mean, you can't subsidize virtue. At the end of the day, you can only practice it. So there are two economies in America today. The first is what I call the real economy. That's the one built by workers, entrepreneurs, and families who get up early, they pay their taxes, and they try to build something better. It's the economy of the independent mechanic, the small manufacturer, the teacher, this person saving for retirement, the mom who starts an Etsy business to pay the bills. It's the economy of sweat and faith. The second economy is the political economy. It's a system where influence replaces effort and subsidies replace success. In that world, lobbyists shape laws, bureaucrats pick winners, and entire industries survive not because they're productive, but because they're protected. How often have we seen this? The economy doesn't create wealth, it just redistributes it. So every time, and let's remember this, every time the government borrows a dollar it doesn't have, it's penalizing the unborn. It's penalizing the next generation. That's not economics, it's generational theft. And that's why, to me, the financial path begins with one word: discipline. Before a nation can balance its books, citizens must balance theirs too. You cannot have a responsible country made up of irresponsible people. The same habits that make a household solvent make the nation strong. And spend less than you earn, save before you spend, invest before you indulge, and never mistake consumption for happiness. I've known several people in my life who do that, and it always ends badly. Now, most of you, I would argue, know these principles instinctively. Yet the culture that we live in is the opposite. We live in a world where marketing whispers, "You deserve it now." Credit cards make it easy and digital payments make it invisible, but this idea that you deserve it now, you only live once, how often do you turn X? I mean, how often do you hear that? Somebody's birthday, how often do you turn X? Let's go do it now, regardless of the consequence down the road. Well, that let's have it now attitude holds in the U.S. today. Our total consumer debt, mortgages, credit cards, student loans, total $18 trillion. That's not just math, it's a mindset problem. Debt is not merely financial, it's psychological. It chains the future to the past, and it turns ambition into anxiety. You cannot dream freely if you owe your life to a lender. And believe me, folks, I understand these issues better than most people. I hope you'll learn from what I've had in my life and take it to heart. It's why I know the path to financial freedom is to get out of debt. Physically and financially, you can't serve two masters, debt and destiny. One will always beat out the other. But I don't want to be confused in this idea of greed in a free market either. Wealth and worth are very different things. Wealth is what you have. Worth is who you are. Wealth measures accumulation. Worth measures contribution. This is a hugely important thing because I think it's the miracle of the free market, because it allows both to coexist. When you create value for others, you build worth. And in doing so, you earn wealth. That's why socialism fails and capitalism succeeds. And I've seen it for 40 years. Socialism fails wherever it's been tried, because wealth becomes, in the socialist systems, wealth is a ration distribution of limited goods. In capitalism, wealth is rewarded for free market behavior and by gratitude. When people line up to buy your product, they're saying, "Thank you for making my life a little better." That voluntary transaction occurring millions of times a day is what makes a free economy work. In the socialist economies, you fight over scarce resources. In a free market, you have a rising tide that lifts all boats. This moral beauty of the marketplace, and that's what it is, creates freedom, independence, and liberty. But when government kind of exchanges that free exchange with entitlement, dignity will die. This is Mandami's problem in New York. By just giving people things, dignity dies. Dependency, he'll find, may feed the body, but it starves the soul. It robs people of purpose. No amount of welfare, none, can replace the feeling of accomplishment that comes from earning your own success. And that's what I mean when I talk about moving from dependency to dignity. If you look at Washington today, you'll see a nation addicted to intervention, and it has been since the 40s. Every crisis is an excuse for another program, another bailout, another trillion in debt. We have confused compassion with control. The government was never meant to be the author of prosperity. It was meant to be the guardian of liberty, but it's forgotten those lessons. In the 1960s, the federal debt was about $290 billion, give or take. Today, it's over $35 trillion. That's an increase of 12,000%. If an individual behaved like that, we'd call it insanity. But when the government does it, we call it policy. I mean, that's why every election has become a bidding war of sorts. Free tuition, free healthcare, free housing. But nothing is free. Someone pays. And the problem in our society is we've forgotten who someone is. It's you. It's the taxpayer. It's the saver, the producer. It's the person who actually obeys the laws of economics while your government continually breaks them. The financial path is largely about restoring honesty to that relationship. It's between effort and outcome and responsibility and reward. I mean, let's remember that money itself is not evil. It's a tool like fire. It can cook your dinner or burn down your house. The difference is moral management. Now, remember also, the Bible never said money is evil. It said the love of money is the root of all evil. The love of money. When we treat money as a master and not as a servant, it becomes destructive. But when we use it as a means to serve, build, and bless, it becomes divine. That's why the financial path is truly inseparable from the spiritual path. Because if you don't have a moral compass, financial success becomes a curse. And again, get to know me and I'll give you personal lessons on all this stuff. A nation of rich fools is just as lost as a nation of poor ones. I mean, look at history. It's replete with examples of this. The fall of Rome was not caused by foreign invasion. You all know that. It was caused by internal rot. The people traded their liberty for comfort, and pretty soon they had neither. Well, the United States risks that very same fate if we forget that freedom and finance are marriage vows. Break one, and you break the other. But there is hope, and I believe that. And I believe the financial path, it's not a lecture, it's a map, it's a journey. And that journey begins with a renewal of entrepreneurship. Every small business is a declaration of independence. When a person decides to serve the market rather than wait for the government, that's an act of faith and freedom itself. You know, today there are roughly 35 million independent Americans that own their own businesses. 35 million. They bet on themselves, not on bureaucracy. They create, those 35 million, they create 2/3 of all new jobs. They innovate much faster than larger companies. They form the backbone of our communities. They're the backbone of all that's good in our free economy. But they're also the ones most burdened by the regulatory state and by taxation. They're often overlooked. They don't have the lobbying power of the big guys, and in many ways they're treated as second-class citizens in their own economy. And that's why we need a new generation of independent Americans who reclaim that entrepreneurial spirit that built this country. You don't have to invent the next iPhone. You can just start with the next idea. I mean, the next service, the next solution to make someone's life better. The market ultimately will reward you because it always rewards service. Let's remember, entrepreneurship isn't about greed. It's about growth, personal and societal. It's how dignity manifests in dollars. So I frequently have people who say to me, how are you so optimistic? And I am. Optimism without discipline is fantasy, and I've been on that path as well. Discipline, though, guided by faith, becomes hope. And I hold true hope for the future of America. Hope built this place. Hope forged every business, every invention, every act of courage that pushed this nation forward. The financial path doesn't teach greed or austerity. It teaches stewardship. It says, manage what God has given you and he will trust you with more. You know that scripture. That's not a prosperity gospel, by the way. It's just biblical economics. If you plant honesty, you harvest trust. If you plant diligence, you harvest success. If you plant envy, you harvest poverty. And nations, like individuals, reap what they sow. So here's my challenge this Monday. Conduct your own audit, not just of your finances, but of your priorities. What do you treasure? What does that say about your heart? If you want to change your financial life, start by changing your financial mindset. Build a habit of saving something every month, of tithing the 10% that we're commanded to. Little things mean a lot. And if you can learn to save your money and avoid debt, bad debt, especially like cancer, well, you'll have skills that will appreciate faster than inflation. And always remember, the greatest investment you make will be in your own character. So the financial path is not built on a spreadsheet. It's more about spiritual discipline in some ways. It's about taking responsibility for your life so that no one else has to. And again, there's a thing in the Bible where it says, before you pluck the straw out of my eye, pull the beam out of your own. This is my path and my journey too. I'm not preaching to you from a place of ignorance. I'm preaching to you as someone who is incorporating these lessons into my life as well. So whether we're talking about the Middle East, reparations in California, or rare earth minerals in China, the lesson is the same. Freedom without responsibility is fantasy, and prosperity without principle, well, that's fraud. So if we as Americans want to rebuild both, we must start with the smallest economy there is, and that's the human heart. Because the moment you master that, everything else will follow. And that's the financial path. So this is the first step on our journey from dependency to dignity. And I'm Steve Beaman, and I want to thank you for walking with me today. Tomorrow, we're going to move down the emotional path, and we'll look at how resilience, gratitude, and relationship shape the soul and the warmth of the soul. Until then, stay well, stay free, stay sovereign, and stay the journey. Thank you and bless you, and have a wonderful day.